You know, I never watched and I need to. Really bad as the wire. Never. I got started on that one. It's part of the. Laptop is probably already. That's in my name. I just sat down somewhere and then Bryce did. Okay. Laptop is probably. Okay. I just sat down somewhere and then Bryce did. If you have a laptop, it's kind of, but if you don't have a laptop, it's probably fine.
Yeah.
Of course, we did well.
in this year and what could we do? So our students, what we found in our conversation was our high school kids have had an opportunity that predominantly the promotion those eighth graders haven't had the opportunity for. So we're taking it from the standpoint for the kids that they have. We didn't get into the dialogue about the patrons that would be in attendance as well.
Well, I was thinking more of the senior high graduations. There's lots of parents that have been vaccinated. There's several kids or students that are over 18 have been vaccinated. So
Keep in mind, my discussion was actually bringing it up with how it related to our seniors and our eighth graders and their activities. I honestly didn't go to the discussion we had with staff. At least that's how I don't remember engaging in that part of it.
I just wanted to bring it up to food for thought.
Anything else? Mr. Rediford or Dana at this point?
Well, I might add also, this actually just came across the news within the last hour that the FDA is, authorizing that emergency use of the COVID-19 vaccine for 12 to 15-year-olds. And we've been anticipating that coming. And an hour ago when I was getting my stuff ready for you guys, it still had not gone through. And then just like 30 minutes before the meeting started, it came across that is going to be happening. So it may be that our 12 to 15-year-olds will at least have a chance to get their first vaccine, but to be fully vaccinated, they would have to have the 2 of the 5.
You do that? Different? Bryce? Board members? Anything? Marcus is in. I never give you the opportunity. All right. With nothing there, then we'll go right into the discussions and we'll start with the fee schedule.
Pretty self-explanatory. I said in the email, we're just changing that fee schedule for this year, kind of giving a 1-year reprieve to families that we can do our part, and also to help encourage to fill out the FDA pre-reduced forms. There's some discussion at the federal level about not even having the forms this year since it's free, so the state will require us to do an alternative family economic survey in order to determine what our at-risk numbers are for at-risk funding. So we're still waiting on guidance from federal government, and that will in turn give us guidance from the state on how we proceed with that. But we basically made it free for all those who qualify for free lunches, took out the $20 tech fee, and then we also had it for those who qualify for reduced. So it'd be a $75, $50, and $0 student enrollment fee now. And we do that for next year. Then we talked about maybe working some of the foundations. Some school districts have certain foundations that will help subsidize student fees for, so we don't have to forego that revenue, which we utilize for different things. Become double-edged sword. We want to pass on and make it as feasible for our families to enroll, and at the same time, though, it's giving up a chunk of change. If we do that, that's $10,000 we give up in fees that we use for to sustain different programs. So it's kind of double-edged sword. So maybe working with some foundations to help maybe offset that in the future, like some other districts do. But for next year, that's our recommendation for that fee schedule.
Okay. Questions or comments on the fee schedule? What person they are. All right. Next one is the summer work session.
So I want to propose, if it works for everybody, June 14th, that's our regular board meeting. We have our admin summer planning session, the 8th, 9th, and 10th. The United School Administrators Convention is the week before that. And then trying to squeeze it in at the end of May is difficult on administrators as they're wrapping up the year. So if we can tie it into our regular board meeting on June 14th, if that's palatable and works for everybody, that might be a good time to do it. Just start early, kind of what we've done in the past on the August or September date, we just do it in June now. If that works for everybody.
Any opposition to that? I think doing it early also gives us an opportunity that if there's some things that we don't meet that night, we can always schedule another one. That before school gets started. So
We're gonna do that here.
Yeah.
all All right, so 6:14, everybody okay with that? All right, moving right along.
Timeline, like 5:35, what works for everybody? What's the earliest we can meet, still make everybody's work schedules work? 5:30? 5:30? Work for everybody?
5:30. We'll have the regular meeting then at 5:30 and then the work session after that.
Would it help if we had sandwiches and stuff for everybody's supper, so you don't have to worry about going home and trying to get off work and eat and then get here? We'll just plan on having supper for everybody at work. Reach to a high-end sub sandwich meal.
All right, anything else on the summer work session at this point? All right, moving on to the action items, additional staff member at CG Junior Senior High.
So I apologize, I had handouts for you, but they didn't make it over with me, so I have them on my screen here, so I'll just share my screen. We did put together a job description this afternoon. Kelly and I sat down and did this, and then we also, Kelly and Jill put together kind of some possible talking points as far as the data goes, summarizing what we talked about last time, and we'll put it on paper so it's easier to and more tangible. So let me pull these up here. So first here is the job description that we created. So basically, in accordance to draft, we kind of talked about what would this person do? They won't do it all at once, but it may change from try or year to year. So we're encompassing everything into this job description that the expectations may be, even though they can't do all this at once, that's impossible. But we may need them to have the fluidness of this position work in the schedule that we talked about last time. We need them to be able to have these responsibilities and expectations at any given time based on the needs and the scheduling and the enrollment. So first one is we talked about that online curriculum support, that's Edgenuity. And so we know the old term is BPL. So if you heard someone out and say something BPL out of habit, used to be that was virtual prescriptive learning. And that was where kids would go in a room and they had a camera and it would shine on them and there was a teacher teaching maybe a class in another district, but everybody was tuning in with television and a camera. So, but those days are gone now. Now with Edgenuity, it's more of an online platform and there's different ones out there, but Edgenuity is what we use in this district. So they would supervise that, those BPL courses we call them, but they're Edgenuity courses. And they would do those 6 bullet points within there. Also, they may supervise a power class course. They may be in that setting where they're taking over a power class course for a core teacher now who has a power class course who's giving up an opportunity to teach additional core classes in science, math, or English, or social studies. Or it might be a seminar setting where we needed to take over a seminar. And so they would do those things within the seminar setting as we have expectations now. And then there may be an interventionist. It may be something, depending on how we restructure the MTSS, which is on the goal list for next year and how we, right now, currently, Ames Web only supports up to 9th grade. And we know our data tells us we have far more needs in reading and math intervention past 9th grade, but we don't, Ames Web doesn't give us a good diagnostic test past that and progress monitoring to support tangible interventions and prescriptive interventions for those kids. And so we're switching next year to FastBridge. So there's training going on at FastBridge because it is also tied to our dyslexia training that we have to do. And also it solves the problem of going on past 9th grade for intervention data for our high school kids. So we will be switching to FastBridge next year, which will provide us far better data for these types of things. And so with that, we'll be looking at how do we revamp our MTSS structure here at the high school. So it's more meaningful, more user-friendly, more walk-to style, most likely, instead of used to be the way you did it. I remember when I was in the previous district, we actually came over here and looked at this district as a model because it was one of the premier districts doing MTSS in the state. So when we started, we actually modeled Council Grove MTSS structure. And the only thing that was tough for us to accomplish and replicate was the fact that MTSS at the high school is a course that you're enrolled in for the full trial. Because the problem that we saw for us was, at that time, was you want kids to challenge themselves to get out of the intervention. You want them to work hard, get in, challenge themselves, fill the gap, and then exit. So have a goal to work towards, right? Well, if they're in it for the whole try, sometimes we see a lack of motivation to work to get out of it because they know, regardless of the progress they make, they're in that role for the whole try. So it'd be nice to make interventions at the high school more of a walk-to style, meaning that they're in it when they need to be in it and they can get out when they don't need to be in it. But that creates some scheduling issues and so forth to work through. So that's the goal that we'll start looking forward to working on MTSS at the high school moving forward. But it all starts with getting the data to know what our kids need, what are their gaps, what are their holes, and Fastbridge will fill that, and then we'll start working on logistics of MTSS at the high school. So that's why we put interventions on there, because they may be an interventionist depending on what their abilities and licensure is. And then of course, the one that's not on here yet, but y'all encompassing in other duties as assigned, because depending on the individual skill set of that person and the licensure of that person, they may be able to do more than just that. So we may need them to fill a hole in another area if they're capable of doing that, fitting with the needs of the schedule. So that's kind of the job description. I apologize, I meant to have this in your hands so you could read through it and digest it as we're talking. But I can email it to you when we're done here as well. Now, and then Mr. McDiffit had Mrs. Day put together some information on the kind of the summarizing what we talked about last time. So let me pull that up here. So here's kind of some of the talking points summarized on paper. Right now, this is currently in the 2021 master schedule. These core teachers are covering either power class or an online course, BPL Edgenuity section. So 1 art teacher, 5 science teachers, 1 social studies teacher, 3 English teachers, 1 math teacher, and then we're 3 teachers' aides on there. Because Brock Finch currently does it, but he's not a licensed teacher. That's kind of a hybrid position that we have. It's above and beyond what an aide does, but it's not what a licensed teacher does. And so it's kind of a hybrid in the tweener stage on our scale. So, but he teaches a power class as well. And then so that's probably, we put a question mark there. So I don't know if that's fair to put up there or not. That's one that's to be determined if that would affect that area. But then you can kind of see what enrollment does for 2021 based on 21-22. So you can kind of look across and see how the numbers increase for classes. Greatly impacted, as Mr. McDiffit talked last time, and some of our upper grade levels, and the classes behind coming in are as big as well. So we'll see this problem coming for some time to come down the schedule. Things that stick out for me with the projected enrollment, this is Jill saying this when she typed this up, so you can read it from her perspective. But then there's some bullet points that she put on that as well.
Most of the, if I could,
Yeah.
Most of that information was what you heard verbally from Jill Day the other night. It's really just putting numbers, a little more accuracy. We didn't have the enrollment numbers that were accurate the other night to see the difference between this year and next year. It really is just giving those where people were currently serving that role. We're pulling it from the classroom is the point. And there's, to think of it this way, a teacher basically at our school, it has 4 of the 5 class periods. So in essence, they'll have 12 of those in the course of the year: first try, second try, third try. That makes sense. So if you look at those first 4 numbers, that comes out to 11 sections, or what we call sections, are being used by current content area teachers. So we can, that's where we think is beneficial. Instead of, we can actually have those teachers offering those courses, core courses, whatever that may be, rather than being in that environment. That's why we would put a licensed teacher in there to provide support as we design on the job description.
We'll have just a minute to read that.
Sure.
Okay.
Let me grab it. Ooh.
That's all right. You said you couldn't.
The talking points is what.
Yeah, I was really talking points. It's okay.
Help me out.
We'll give Mr. Doty just another minute to come back for those of you watching online. He ran to get some handouts. He's anything like me, they're right where I left them right before I moved them.
Sorry, guys, I just couldn't read that fast.
No, you're fine.
Can you see him?
Yeah.
Yeah, plenty of time to read.
Any questions or comments that have come up? Those are being passed around. Thoughts, questions? Motions?
I have a question.
There we go.
I know that Mary Kay had put something last time about the kind of the scope maybe of the job for this person, because we already have another DPL teacher in the building. And I think what she alluded to last time was kind of that this position seems to be very utilitarian rather than focused in specific content areas. And because there is two positions, is there any way that we could look at the strengths of the current person in the building and hire for someone who would be complementary to that? Like if we need math and English, is there a way that we could hire someone good for those content areas that could focus more in that to be more I just said focused again, but to be more focused with the position. Does that make sense, or is that too, it doesn't fit?
Right, no, I think I understand. Let me answer this, as it's not how you're doing, but let me know. So right now, our current one detail teacher is not enough.
Right.
So what Mr. Hula does isn't enough. He also teaches one PE class, that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so he still has one PE class, then the rest are DEO courses.
Each trimester.
Each tribe. And so it's not enough, which has led us to the problem of pulling teachers in where they figure out the schedule, teach those additional classes. So either without this position, we have to reduce that load, the availability of kids, and to what Bruce can handle himself. And then also, then when you start looking from just the VPL course load, then that led into an entire class course load, because we do have teachers cover the entire class as well. Which then led into the MTSS discussion and how we're going to revamp that with availability, because there's only so much you can do in a walkthrough style, like probably most likely you'll have to be during a seminar type time. And so looking at how that works and what's available during that time with the seminar structure and so forth. So if we just focused on, the problem is the need changes so frequently based on what enrollment is. Like in a high school schedule, it just depends on what the needs are. If we have 30 kids and we go tech school versus 10, that makes the afternoon session for Jill a lot different on how she can flexibility for scheduling classes. So it changes so often. Every try it changes based on what the enrollment needs are. And so that's where this position was more attractive. We talked about it being able to free up within that. So like on that top piece, we'll get 5 more science sections available from this position. We'll get throughout the year, 3 more English sections available, and potentially more depending on certifications there. Because one of our English teachers currently does the yearbook. So if we assign this person the yearbook, that would free up our certified English teacher to teach another section under trial of English. And then obviously math and so forth. So that's where this kind of gives a little more flexibility, where we would hire a handful, if we just hire a content teacher, and we may free up in that content, but we wouldn't free up in some of these other areas, as that pendulum constantly swings on these try to trial. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions? Comments?
I guess the piece that I'm looking at when we're looking for someone, I'm assuming we would be looking for someone that has a strong tech background that would be able to assist students in getting online, assist them with questions, and be able to assist them should they have issues with their devices, those kind of things.
That definitely is one of the expectations. That supervised, that logistical management, number 2 on online curriculum, logistical management of the online platform for students and courses. So what that means is like what Bruce does now, or any other people do it. There's a lot. It's just not sitting there watching kids work. They've got to go in and actually work with kids individually when they have needs. And if they can't, then they try to get them to the right teacher to do it. And then they have to go in and do grades. So they pull the grades out of it and put in Power School. So there's grades there. And then they also have to go in and work with that student on pacing. So they monitor that student. Let's say a student's in American government. Well, we know by this date, by pacing, they should be this far. By this date, they should be this far. So that ingenuity teacher then has to go and monitor that. They jump in if I'm wrong in time. So don't speak out of turn, but they have to monitor that pacing. And if they're off, they have to go to that kid and say, hey, you're off. You continue this pace, you're not going to get done. So you won't get your credit. So they work with the kids in that pacing aspect. And then they also work with the kids. Let's say I take a test, I'm the student in detail, and I fail that test. I need to reset. Then the instructor has to go in and reset that test and reopen it back up so the kid can retake it again. So there's a lot of logistics behind the scenes that goes into it too. So they'd have to be familiar with Ingenuity and be trained in Ingenuity to do all that and manage those courses as well.
I would only follow that with, that sure helps. There is, as Aaron shared in answering Deidre's question, actually a well-rounded certified instructor. Instructional support is one of the pieces that we also have by managing those numbers that'll help. So that they can actually help the kids when they are struggling. They're not obviously in the content area classroom, but they can add to or give support instructionally when the numbers are managed better. That could be across a lot of different content areas. That's why I think the instructor and the teacher, certified teacher, is actually something why we kind of stepped it up there in terms of that expectation of getting certified educator.
Now the good news, in today's educational world, most teachers now are pretty savvy with the tech just because that's the world they live in. Now everything's online now. All of our student software is online. Our student management software is online. Our intervention software is online. So almost everything, they have to be pretty savvy in it now. So it's just learning an additional platform.
What is the current MTSS level at the high school watch as needed?
Good question.
Yes, I would say right now we have, although it's not happening In an MTSS format, we have tier intervention at the high school and at the junior high, but it's really more working on skills for math. We have a high school teacher actually helping with that 3 semesters, and a high school teacher helping with the high school kids that show need in terms of 2. But it's not really happening at the high school level right now. That I would call MTSS, where you have progress monitoring, you're in and you're out. Which is why we feel like we honestly, we need to move, we've never had, we back up. We also, with reading support, by scheduling it in, we've really struggled to have, especially at the high school level, by having it scheduled into the classroom or in a regular class period. It's difficult for kids to schedule into that because they also have the need to graduate to get the electives, things that keep them moving in the high school curriculum anyway. So we really need to revert more to using our seminars better is what our hope is in terms of the MTSS intervention model, which then would be using actually the protocols that are in place, the moving them through progress monitoring. When they do that, they're back in. They don't need to report. It would allow for a better walkthrough model.
So just as I think about it, the power class to me is like tier 2 or tier 3
It's not.
intervention.
It's not. Another word for it would be more study hall, and it's kids that either have through 504 or IEPs, actually many of them have need for support, just support. It's time. It's not, it has nothing to do with MTSS. They're not put in that course because of it could be a contributing factor because they have data from the MTSS, but that's not always the way they're in there.
But that's one of the things, okay, that we've got to change at the high school. Our data shows us that we got to change that. We know that. Kelly knows that. Teachers know that. We've had this discussion. Kelly Gentry has. We know we've got to make that a focus, a priority of getting that back in the system in place for students. Fast Bridge will be a big help for that now. We'll have a tool that's more meaningful. I think a lot of times, names where you get a sophomore or junior testing, but it's testing higher than it's an 8th grade equivalent test, isn't it? So, yeah. So this will give us more real, it'll be more meaningful, I think, too. So we got to get it established again.
Right, and just taking a big step back, that starts with core instruction. So just making sure we have good core instruction and providing what the kids need in all these areas. So that there's
Other thoughts? Other questions? Anyone want to go out on a limb?
I'll jump in front of you, right? Mr. President, I move that we approve the request for additional licensed student support teacher at CG junior high and senior high.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we approve the additional staff member at CG Junior High, JSHS. I think those are additional, right? Discussion on that item. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Thank you. Yeah. All right, our next item, building blocks lease agreement.
Yeah, so we just need to review that annually, and so this is the time to do that. Everything's gone pretty well over there. Abby, the new director, has done an outstanding job. We've had a few hiccups along the way, but no fault of theirs. It's just the communication between us and them, and mainly on our end. So every time we go with it to them, she responds well to it. So it's been a good year in a crazy year situation.
They did playground improvements over the weekend.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes, the playground looks amazing.
Yes,
And how nice is it to have a tenant who improved your property?
right.
Mhm.
Have any thoughts on the lease? So just for clarification, this is a 2-year lease. So they're locked in for 1 more. So this would extend it back to.
So it's always a rolling year. So
Right.
if we want to break our lease, we have to notify them now for not next year, the following year. So So we give them 1 year notice, basically. Yeah. So this would lock them in for, we would let them know for next year and the following year, and then we let them know next year for the 3rd year out if we wanted to not renew.
Questions, comments, concerns? Building blocks lease?
Mr. President, I move we approve the lease agreement with Building Blocks on a rolling 2-year agreement.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we approve the building blocks lease as presented on the rolling 2-year. Any further discussion on that item? All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed?
I get 5 minutes executive session for personnel.
Let me get. Mr. President, I move to go into an executive session to discuss an individual employee's performance pursuant to the non-elected personnel exemption under COMA with Mr. Doty, the board, for 5 minutes.
And there'll be no action, so everybody's good to go.
Move to second, we have a 5-minute executive session for personnel. Discussion on that, all in favor, raise your right hand. Thanks everybody for coming. Have a wonderful evening.
Congratulations, Angela.
Yeah.
Thank you.